everyone, and welcome to Writers Drinking Coffee. This is a podcast of a bunch of writers who sit around, drink, and talk about writing, publishing, and the whole creative process. We do not censor ourselves, so consider us PG-13. Tonight's hosts are John Schmidt and me, Jeannie Warner. This is episode 87, interview with Carol Wolf. Welcome back, Carol.
Thank you. Great to be back.
We have not seen you since season 1 when we chatted about making plays and we needed more time. And you just have so much that you've done that's fascinating.
Well, thank you.
So for those
I feel like I'm like a shotgun. I had a teacher in college who taught ceramics, and he said in his experience, most artists have a huge range of things that they can do, but what they end up doing is the one they got rewarded for first. And he was rewarded for this teapot that he had made, and that doomed him to be a ceramicist for the rest of his life. So I had a play produced when I was 19, and that, really centered me on playwriting. And then in this market where all of the boomers in the world started writing plays and trying to get productions got harder and harder, I went into book writing and I went into movie making, and now I'm writing pictures books, and it's like, I'm like a shotgun, okay, I'll try this now.
Well, I respect that. We met, I don't know if you've ever met Damien Trasler up in Canada right now, but he was saying, he's not successful at all. He only makes $60 to $80 a month and constantly has 1 or 2 plays being performed. I'm like, according to Carol, that makes you a successful playwright, just not a lucrative one.
Oh, yes. If you have plays in production, then you are a playwright. Way to go. No, that's awesome.
You were saying, go him. So last time, I'm going to say, for those just tuning in, we talked about creating tension, making 3D characters, and the particularly in plays about writing for a confined visual space. So let's take some of that out and talk about film and novels and podcasting and all of the other fun writing things that you do.
Well,
so you started
from writing plays to writing screenplays and films was quite a learning curve, because plays are all driven by the language. They're all driven by the dialogue and the layers that you put into the dialogue, and you build the action of the play right into the dialogue so that the actors have to do what you want, like sit down now, or you want to be sitting down for this, or things like that. But the fact is, you can write your dialogue so that your actors know how, by saying it, how far apart they're standing from each other when they speak, which is something I learned from Shakespeare. So I started writing screenplays, and I wrote a number of screenplays, and then we started a micro-budget film company, and we took the first one into production. And the director of we scheduled this thing where we were filming up here on our land, and we filmed every weekend for 5 months, from Friday night until Sunday night. 180 scenes we had to film in 5 months. And we had to film it in that time because in May, the grass turns brown. And this whole movie took place in one day, and the grass was green. So we had to finish it before the grass turned brown. So wrote the screenplay, handed it off to the director, and the director's looking at the screenplay and looking at how much time we have to shoot. And she takes this pen and starts going, cross out, cross out, cross out, cross out, because I had written it driving it with the dialogue. And the director, looking through the eye of the camera, just needed the camera to tell the story. Now, I was the director, right? So I had the screenplay self, handed it to my director self, and my director learned a lesson right then. Okay, let's cut these 3 pages. Learning to look through the eye of the camera and tell the story that way is a completely different way of looking at storytelling. And what a joy to start taking that on. And I'm still a baby, but at least I know it when I see it.
Did you, seems to be a whole different language. Did you make yourself write better slug lines? And
Wait, what's a slug line?
Ooh, the slug line is at the beginning of the scene where it says, outside, pasture, Bob is tending sheep.
Just like a play is a blueprint for what the director and actors need to do on the stage, the screenplay is a blueprint for the producer and the director and the actors. Producer, director first, actors last. That is why in a screenplay, the first thing in the scene is in all caps. It tells you whether you're inside or outside, because that is fundamental to how you're going to film this thing, whether you need to build a set inside or go find a location outside. So it's interior or exterior, INT or EXT, and then where it is and the time of day. And the time of day is also absolutely necessary because the director of photography needs to know what he's lighting. So the slug line is a production thing. And then under that, in regular print, from left to right, all the way across your page is what the camera is looking at, because that's the most important thing about that scene. And what's being said in the scene by the actors is offset in the middle so that you can ignore it if you're the camera guy and just go back and forth, right, from the left to the right margin with the important stuff. And the actors look in the middle for what they're supposed to be saying, because it's the least important thing in the scene.
Some shadow play about the nature of sheep herding, no doubt.
Play scripts, on the other hand, have the actor dialogue running from the left to the right margin, and it is the scene directions, the stage directions that are offset because they are not important. So there's that right there to show you how the blueprints are different.
So how would you, now I'm going to say, would it be easier to turn a novel into a screenplay or a play into a screenplay?
Probably a play because it's the right length. Novels nowadays are 100,000 words, 300 pages, and that's 1.5 movies, which is why when people go and see their favorite novel as a movie, they always scream, because you have to take out so much in order to, you have to reduce it down to its cogent plot points, and by that you lose so much. Novels have so much more information in them than a screenplay will. So the best prose form to turn into a screenplay would be a novella, because that's just about right. What, 45,000 words?
Yeah.
1,000 words? Yeah. That is about the right amount of material for the story that goes into the screenplay.
So if I were taking, you have my favorite of all of your play titles that I've read so far is The Terrible Experiment of Jonathan Fish, a musical extravaganza for which most of the music has been canceled. They'd probably make it a movie and just say, Fish, a musical.
And then the first 3 reviews of it would say, this is the beginning of cancel culture. But is that really the title of that play?
Yes, that is the whole title of that play.
Is there any music in it at all?
Oh, yeah. I wrote a whole bunch of songs for it. It has about 24 minutes of songs, which is 1 minute less than the legal definition of a musical. So when it goes into production again, I'm going to write another song, and then it will legally be a musical. Though I could just hand it off to the music director to write an overture, and then it will be legal too.
Back up. There's a legal limit of how many.
Yeah. Tell us more about this legal definition.
Well, there are legal definitions for everything in theater. For example, the legal definition of a full night of theater for which you can charge a full ticket price is 70 minutes. Your play has to be 70 minutes long in order for your producer to call it a full-length play, a full evening of theater. Because I guess what that means is, because all of this is down to litigation, right? That means that some theater producer made a 35-minute play, charged a full evening of theater price for it, and everybody was pissed. So they had to make a definition. So it's 70 minutes.
I'm just dying to see the law cases and read the notes on that one. I'm sorry, this was a one-act play of one actor standing on stage throwing tomatoes at the audience, and they charged me a full ticket price for it.
And they promised it'd be gluten-free, and it wasn't. But anyway.
They were gluten-filled tomatoes, yes.
So going back, so you're saying a novella is the perfect length to convert. And yet I know successful longer stories, and I'm going to name 2 of them just because they're right at the top of my head, or not successful longer stories, but stories that have been successful. Ooh, we haven't even talked comic books, such as Neil Gaiman's Stardust and his Neverwhere. Except for Neil Gaiman writes everything episodically anyway, so you can just pick the part of the story you want.
But there was still a ton cut off. Carol's right. You know, some of my favorite scenes didn't really make it into the movie.
Yeah, that's what happens, is that just the quantity of material has to fit into a smaller box, unless you make, like Peter Jackson did, a 3.5-hour movie. But there's still a lot cut from Tolkien in order to make, those books into 3.5-hour movies, which made a lot of people mad.
And I suppose there's a certain, when you're writing a play, you don't, I mean, for all that you might write a setting description, plays might be done in a wide variety of ways and with a wide variety of groups. And in this, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are played by very well-behaved Chihuahuas. And so there's that flexibility, but it doesn't really the same for a screenplay, is it?
Well, the screenplay, when you look at a screenplay and it says by so-and-so, unless that so-and-so is also the director and the executive producer or some combination of the same, very likely that screenplay name represents 12 other people who worked on it, who are not credited, right? Just about every mainstream screenplay goes through this process where a dozen different people work on it just to make it as good as it can be in the eyes of the producers. So when you turn your work in, when a screenplay writer turns their work into the producer, first of all, it's not yours anymore. You don't have any control over it. And everybody, including the producer's girlfriend's best friend's stepbrother, gets to have input. And then, they go back to the screenplay writer and say, you should put this in. And then you do, because it is the director that is telling the story. The screenplay is just a small part of the way to the story. The director is the one who's telling it. And he uses the screenplay as a jump-off point. And it needs to be a very strong jump-off point, but it is malleable by everyone in the production. Unlike a playwright. In the playwright's contract, in every Dramatist Guild playwright contract, and what ought to be in every playwright's contract, you playwrights out there who don't have this, make sure you do, there is a paragraph that says, nothing in the play can be changed, not one word, and that includes the punctuation without the written permission of the playwright. The play is the property of the playwright. And the difference is because when you go into production with a movie, it is the director's job to make it work. If it doesn't work, it falls on the director that it didn't. But when you go into production with a play, the actors and the director are depending on the playwright to know what they are doing to make it work. If the playwright doesn't know what they are doing, no matter how good the actors are, no matter how great the director is, it's not going to work.
That is a very clear difference. So I noticed, besides the documentaries, you did horror. How fun was that?
Well, what happened is that we have a friend in San Jose who's a photographer, filmmaker, and he said, if you make a horror movie, you can sell it for $100,000 no matter how bad it is. And Eric and I were planning to make movies. We'd already made a couple of shorts. And so our plan was to save up the money while we were practicing making these shorts and then make a horror movie and then a micro-budget horror movie, sell it for $100,000, and then use the money to make the next movie and the next movie after that. And what fun would that be? So we wrote a horror movie, and we were showing it around, and we got funding from a friend of ours who saw the little shorts that we had made and said, so how much would it cost to put you into business? And we told him how much it would cost to buy the camera, the tripod, and some other equipment, and he wrote us a check. And there we were in business before we had done all that, learning curve stuff. So we started making one movie just to learn how to light night scenes, how to follow when something is moving, how to shoot the camera, how to shoot while a moving object, just learning our basic skill set. And then when we had that, while we were doing that, I was writing the screenplay for The Valley of Fear. And the following January, we went into production with The Valley of Fear. And we shot it in 5 months. We shot 180 scenes. Every one of our actors came on time, ready to work. God, they were awesome. And we finished it, and we did post-production for 5-6 months, and we had it out the following year, by which time every filmmaker on the planet had gotten that memo that if you make a horror movie, no matter how bad, you can make $100,000. And so a couple of things that we had not learned going into it, which is that you have to have a name in order to sell it to a distributor. But what you really have to do is you have to secure distribution beforehand in order to sell it, before you put money into it. That's how professionals do it. And we didn't know that because we were not professionals. So it's on Amazon. The Valley of Fear is up on Amazon. And the other thing we learned is that we are not that good at horror. We had our best blood shot. We used 2.5 gallons of blood. We were so proud of it. And then we were watching the making of one of these other horror movies, and they had a blood cannon that shot
A blood
22
cannon?
gallons.
I feel like now I have blood cannon envy.
They had a blood cannon that shot 22 gallons a minute of blood, and we knew we were so outclassed. We were so outclassed. So we're the movie, The Valley of Fear, is funny. It is not that horrible. So if you are 11, you may be a little bit scared, but not otherwise. But there it is. It's up on Amazon. And the movie that we started with, Far from the Sea, which is the autobiography of Eric Elliott, a film by Carol Wolf, is also up there because we finished that one the next year.
That is so cool.
2008.
Although I'm just going to bring a cannon of blood into every discussion from now on. But is it cannon of blood worthy or? Yeah, I had heard that in a lot of ways, shooting horror is also one of the cheaper ways to make a movie. Yeah.
Can be.
I mean,
Though,
unless you have to go build your very own blood cannon. But
it can be, though I maintain that your basic production value of being able to tell every character apart, which I very often can't in cheap horror movies, and also be able to see their faces no matter how dark it is, because lighting. That for me is the base. Oh, and be able to, and that the sound needs to be good enough whereby you can hear everything that is, everything that happens. So sound casting and lighting needs to be at least, translatable. And I'm proud of Valley of Fear because even though it is a cheap horror movie, we got all those things right.
Stage shows. Shotgun artist. What do you see evolving most? Because, and I'm going to throw something out there, somewhere between a screenplay and stagecraft is what's going to happen with online things based on Zoom. Your thoughts? Does that make sense to you?
Oh, yes. I think Zoom is awesome. I spent the summer watching the Santa Cruz Shakespeare do the Wars of the Roses, and their production values were that the correct characters were looking at each other and handing each other things and killing each other. I mean, I think Zoom theater is awesome. It's very inexpensive, and that's the problem with a lot of productions is you're putting a lot of money into a play that that may or may not make any money. But Zoom, very low production costs. You can bring your audience in from anywhere.
Did you see the BBC did something called Staged, and they used Michael Sheen and David Tennant and Judi Dench and a whole bunch of others where they were rehearsing for a play during the time of COVID?
No, I missed that. How was it?
I hurt myself laughing for the parts of it that I saw, and I'm a little bit bitter about subscribing to something new so that I can get it, but sooner or later I'm going to, because it really is okay, well, I guess we've got to run our lines. You do it. Are you going to eat that in the middle of it?
Wait a second. Tennant and Sheen, the same stars as Neil Gaiman and Pratchett's Good Omens?
Yes.
Why am I not watching this right now?
And add Judi Dench, and I'm just saying.
Add Judi Dench?
She's like, be professional, boys. They're like, but you're fucking Judi Dench. She just showed up. She's like, that's right, I am. It's truly hilarious. They're playing themselves, and I don't know who all wrote it. I haven't dug into it. I just know that it makes me laugh constantly. So I think you're right. I think there may be some Zoom comedy still to come.
Oh, yeah. I mean, why should we lose this art form? I mean, they said when radio came in that theater would die, and then we had radio plays and theater. And then they said when television came in, the theater would die, and then we had television and radios and film in there somewhere too. So just more and more ways to tell stories. It is like we humans are trying to tell every story every story that can possibly be made from our minds to each other as fast as we can through every possible medium. This isn't. We're having. You can see from the last century through now and onward the explosion of creativity, especially in creative storytelling. Bring in comic books and animation and puppetry and hundreds of things that I haven't thought of because I haven't seen them yet, but they're there. I mean, it's astounding what we're doing right now. The explosion of creativity on the ground kind of matches the corruption and misery that is also going on. It's sort of like yin and yang, and I hope creativity wins because it is glorious. It is just glorious.
Well, they say dark times make for good comedy.
God help.
Have you seen any of your work that it's produced well in a way that surprises you in this way? Are there Carol Wolf via Zoom yet? Or
well,
puppets?
I had a reading of my Cymbeline play, and I think I told you about that last time, at the Pear. And
That was fantastic.
Yeah, that was a great reading. And after that, two different groups of people contact me after the lockdown and asked if they could do a Zoom reading of Cymbeline because they remembered it from the Pear. And so I saw two different readings, one with people who were amateurs and one with people that were not so much amateurs. And they both worked really well. It was really funny and enjoyable. But that's as much as happened with that. I was part of the Pear Theater did a devised content piece last summer for the last show of the season in May, because they had lost the rights to the Sondheim play that they were going to do because Sondheim will not be streamed. So
That's kind of a shame.
Well, so the artistic director got the Playwrights Guild to do devised to create content for him. And we all wrote pieces about the lockdown, comic pieces, less comic pieces, and put those all together into a play. So that was an interesting experience. He filmed it. The actors were in their places and the director was on the phone with them, watching them and, filming them in that manner, which I thought was a new way of making a film. So it was a play that was filmed in the end, and then streamed.
That's fantastic. Except now I'm actually saying there's got to be a title of a piece that just says Sondheim will not be streamed.
And then you stream it.
And it's going to be somewhere there's a play director and then the playwright and two of the actors. It's only going to be 4 people and they're all going to be saying here, we can't stream the Sondheim. Well, what if he doesn't have to know? If we leave out one song, nobody likes that song anyway, then it's not 30 minutes. And I mean, really, you could turn this whole thing into a musical.
Well, you could make a parody. Parody's fair game.
Parody is fair game.
Has anyone got Randy Rainbow's contact info?
I am so ready for Randy Rainbow's 2020 musical, and I will play full price, even if it's only 35 minutes in a theater. Do it, Randy, if you're listening.
Moving on, I actually earlier fell down the complete hole of legal definitions and discovered that there are websites now where you can get the contracts for any aspect of doing a play, which I find fascinating, especially because they range from, okay, you're going to put a play on Broadway. Here's the set of legal agreements you need to start with, all the way down to, oh, you're going to do an independent production of something. Here's what you should consider. And I have both. Well, I have produced and acted and sung in plays. I have not written a play, nor have I directed a play. So, wow, thank you, Carol. If you were going to, shotgun artist Carol, what is your next step in plays? Are you going to produce more? Are you going to write more?
I am writing a play called War, which I am 3/4 of the way through, and I'm in the Playwrights Guild with the Pear. And they've been reading it for me because that's what we do for each other in 10-minute increments. When I have it done, I want to have a Zoom reading of it. And I hope you guys will come because I'd love to have you there. John, I'd love to have you read.
I'd love to read.
Totally.
So sometime this spring, I want to do that. Before we shut down, there's a guy in Kansas City who wants to do Thousandth Night out there, which I think is cool. And then I have the French production company that is who still own the rights of La Millième Nuit, the French version of the Thousandth Night. So that's still in play. And I fantasize about a production of The Terrible Experiment of Jonathan Fish, which, even though I wrote it long ago, is still timely because it's about sexual harassment in the workplace. So I wrote a play about sexual harassment in the workplace. That is to say, on stage, where the stage manager rewrites the play so that he can make love to the actress he is in love with and then, hires her to be in the play so that he can, fondle her and kiss her on stage legally, right? It's in the play. It's all in the play. There's a lot.
Oh my God.
There's a lot of other things going on in the play. It has in the real world, the stage manager has taken the play of this passionate, angry writer, feminist writer, which is all about, the awfulness of the patriarchy, which was called The Terrible Experiment. And he has ripped it up and torn it to pieces and thrown out most of the music and fired most of the cast so that he could write and turned it into a rom-com so that he could hire this starlet and make love to her on stage. So the remains of the play is about a man who raises his daughter to believe that there are three sexes, men, women, and girls. This is
Oh my God.
long
This is
ago.
amazing.
He is a man, she is a woman, and the job of men and women is to be helpmates to one another, and girls' job is to become wives and serve them. So he is a man, she's a woman, and then he is strangled to death by the ghost of his dead wife. And there are songs. And then she finds out, her cousin comes over and she finds out he is her legal guardian because she is not yet 25. It's set shortly after Darwin, so in the 19th century. And she finds out that in order for him not to be her guardian, she has to get herself a husband. So she goes husband hunting and then discovers that means that she'll be a wife. So anyway, and
I don't know. I think it could still work in Hollywood in the 70s.
I think it could work in Silicon Valley now, based on my experiences in local theater groups, which we will not go into at this time.
Yeah, I was going to say, how is the novel writing going and all of this shotgunning of stuff? You had a book out last time we talked. How are you doing? Are you writing more?
I started a novel about a year ago about a kid who finds a magic knife. And then we locked down. And I realized that no one is going to care about a kid who finds a magic knife if he's not also locked down. So I would have to rethink it. So then I thought I would write the backstory of where the magic knife came from, which took me to Gertrude Bell, the explorer of the desert back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Gertrude Bell is the woman who created the country of Iraq. She was one of the great experts on the desert, on the Middle East at the time, and knew Lawrence of Arabia and them guys and everything. She was at the conference, and she drew the lines that created Iraq, and was there when the king was crowned. So what I thought was she was the one who originally found the magic knife, and I knew when she found it. So I started doing the backstory, but the materials for what she was doing that summer are in, Newcastle, the University of Newcastle.
Newcastle on Tyne?
Yep. So I think I have to go there before I can write this book. So then I gave that one up and I started writing a Regency romance. Because when you're locked down and there's a pandemic and other things are happening, what better than to write a Regency romance?
We approve of anything that gets people through this time. I think I've been reading shifter romances this summer just because when you need something light and Frito, and I can get through a whole book in the hour and a half before I go to bed. So romance is important.
Yeah, and anything that can take your mind away, that really can, take your mind and hold it away for a while.
And John and I stand up and salute you for actually getting writing done in the last year, because
oh my God, yes.
We had talked so much about how it really is that people hadn't felt creative, and if it weren't for deadlines, they wouldn't get out. But to actually start something new and then get through it, that's a beautiful thing, and I salute you.
And also having the wisdom to say, yeah, this one isn't going to work right now, and this is the research I need to do, and then move on and get something else going. Ew, ooh.
Well, the trick is to always be thinking about stories and always have a backlog, always have not just one on the back burner, but one of those stoves that has 14 burners, and some of them may burn up before you get to them, but always having the funnest part of writing is actually that inception point, the making up. After that, it's okay, what happens next? Okay, what happens next? That starts to look a little more like work. And then actually sitting down and writing it, there's the real work for you. And what I'm finding is the best way to get through that is to do it in increments of about 500 words. So you say, today I will write 500 words. So you sit down before breakfast and write. Oh, my breakfast is about 2:00 these days. Sit down before breakfast and write, 100 or 200 words. And then in the afternoon, you only have 100 or 200 words more to do. Or 300 words to do. So, if you do 3 increments that are very short, you feel so satisfied to have just done a couple hundred words. Yes. But then a couple more 100 words and a couple more, and there you are, 500 words.
That fits beautifully with my theory that the 3 most important human emotions are lust, ecstasy, and smugness.
Oh, I like that. That's wonderful.
For all that is desire and yearning and ambition falls under lust, and ecstasy is having realized that moment of true connection with whatever the heck it was. And then there's smug,
Which is when you have 500 words under your hands. Ha, 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 503 tonight.
Yeah, look at me go. I'm trying to crawl back onto the 100 days, 100 words horse myself. So if I can even get started with that 100 words tonight, by God, I'm going to do it.
What are you working on, Jeannie?
A couple different projects. I have a space opera that got stalled out. I have a sequel to a 1901 fantasy noir, historic fantasy noir. I've decided that's my new genre. And I also have a horror screenplay that I really need to get out because I owe it to somebody who said, I'll make a movie if you'll just send me something.
Awesome.
Many, many different pieces going. My problem was I thought I was writing horror, and he got the first 20 pages like, this is a wonderful and expensive movie because you've said it in the past and it's kind of a thriller, not a horror. I'm like, oh, you're right.
Oh,
So
Jeannie, what's the difference?
thrillers can be very and psychological and edge of the seat and creating a different kind of tension, whereas horror, a blood cannon.
Okay, can it be both? Can a story be both?
Oh,
Yes.
absolutely. Absolutely. Think
But-
of, there was a movie that came out with Sam Neill that was about the edge of a black hole. And they were finding all of this stuff. And it turned out it was not just the edge of a black hole, but it was the portal to a chaos hell dimension. And by halfway through, you had fountains of blood. So
We're talking about Event Horizon.
that's the one. If I use enough words, it comes through. It started out as a thriller and then just became a horror movie.
Which do you like better, horror or thriller?
I tend to like thrillers, but I have a love of monster movies and a love of dark magic. And so I like comedy horror. For instance, they made John Dies at the End, sorry, John, into a movie. And it wasn't the book, but it was still hilariously funny and yet horror. And I kind of dug that too. So complicated.
Yeah.
Isn't everything?
Yeah, but like there was one that came out recently and I thought, my God, that is the simplest idea ever. I bet it was cheap to film. I haven't watched it yet. It's the one called The Shed, where a guy discovers that a shed on his property is like a hellmouth or something. And rather than him fighting it, he just sort of feeds people he doesn't like to it.
Oh, how cool.
I mean, there was like this beautiful question that went around the internet a couple years ago saying, okay, you have a room with 3 doors in it, and one goes to Narnia, and one goes to Middle Earth, and one goes to Oz, and one goes to Neverland. Where do you go? And I'm like, I sit in the doorway with a table and I sell tickets to idiots who want to go live in any of these places. So I don't want to go to any of them. I just want to make a great deal of money off of giving people their heart's desire.
I think Middle Earth, you'd have to choose the time period because there was, centuries apiece. Centuries apiece.
You say that, but is it near the Witch King of Angbad is where it opens up and the tunnels beneath his old, castle, Cardoom, or...
So you're saying the whole of Middle Earth is basically a horror story?
I always kind of considered it that way, yeah.
There's plenty of horrific places in there to offset the beauty of other places.
That may be our alarm clock. I was going to...
Carol, I hear you have a new book out. What's it called?
I have a book called The Book of Lost Days, which is a science fiction action story, which starts with a girl who believes that she's grown in a clade where they grow people of a certain genetic line, and everybody guesses about what line they are as they're growing up. And she thinks she's a Digby because Digby was a polymath, a woman who was a polymath and could do just about anything. And she's sure she was a Digby because of how clever she is. And in this culture, when you're 14, they send you out to make your living for a year, because that's when nobody wants to deal with you and teach you some hard truths about life. So she's doing her year and becomes a courier on a space station and decides what she's going to do is she's figured out mathematically how you can jump the gates. You go from one gate to another to get very fast from one place to another. And she's figured out the mathematical formula. And then as she goes through the gate, she realizes that she got one little thing wrong and wakes up in a med pod back on her home planet with her back at her clade, where they tell her that she's not a Digfee. She was actually a private construct, and she has to go back to her planet. And by the way, you're not a girl. You're actually a boy.
And then it starts getting complicated, right?
Planet is a reserve planet where they're still back in the Middle Ages. So
That sounds great. And we will definitely put a link out there for it. Along with the other pieces we mentioned on there, you can find us on Facebook or Twitter. Our website is www.writersdrinkingcoffee.com. You've been listening to Writers Drinking Coffee, a labor of love and enthusiasm put together by the hosts. Our main web support magic is brought to you by Deirdre Schween, and our sound engineer and backup web spider is David Welsh. Our intro music is Pretty Maid Milking a Cow, and our exit music is Breakfast with the Morning Person, both by Michael Langberg. You can hear more from Michael Langberg on manyhatsmusic.com. Thanks so much for coming back with us, Carol.
My pleasure. It's always fun talking with you guys.
And you out there, thank you for listening to us. We appreciate it.